The first time I walked this forest, I didn't know it was waiting for me. The trees stretched like silent sentinels, their branches tangled together above, blotting out the sky until only a pale, trembling light seeped through. The fog curled at my ankles, soft and cold, and somewhere far off, a thin, persistent hum drifted through the air, like the forest itself was breathing. My flashlight flickered once, twice, and then steadied, revealing a narrow path I didn't remember from before. The ground was damp, the smell of moss and decayed leaves thick, and I could hear nothing but the rustle of my own movements. Every step seemed louder than the last, echoing as if someone or something was walking just behind me. I told myself it was only my imagination, yet the shadows seemed to twist in ways that didn't match the trees. Then, just as I thought I could turn back, I saw it. A shape, pale and still, standing at the edge of the path, almost blending into the mist. My breath caught and my legs froze. I never should have opened the path. It was early morning, the kind where the sun hasn't decided if it wants to rise. The forest stood still. No birds, no wind, just the slow breath of fog rolling between the trees. It brushed against my legs, cool and damp like something alive. Each step I took left no trace. The ground was soft, too soft, as if it remembered every footstep that had ever walked here. I remember thinking how strange it was to hear nothing at all, until I heard it. My name, whispered. It didn't echo, it slid through the mist, close and quiet, almost gentle, like it wanted me to listen. I stopped, waited. The fog drifted past my knees, curling around my fingers when I reached out. It felt warm for a second, then cold again. There was no one there, but the air it carried something moving, a rhythm, a pulse. I took another step, and another. The trees stretched tall above me, vanishing into the pale gray. Their bark glistened with beads of moisture, like sweat. I could taste it on my tongue, the metallic dampness of earth and decay. The fog thickened, and the whispers followed. Not words, not yet, just threads of breath, weaving between branches, slipping past my ears. Sometimes it sounded like laughter, other times like sighing, then a phrase, half-formed, half mine, come closer. The sound was behind me, then ahead, then both. I turned slowly. Everything looked the same, white, gray, and endless. The path beneath my feet began to fade, swallowed by the mist. The ground rippled, like water disturbed by something beneath. I knelt, pressed my hand to the soil. It was trembling. A faint vibration moved through it, steady like a heartbeat. I could feel it in my palm and in my chest, matching my own pulse. The whispers grew louder, faster, layered over one another until they blurred into static. I covered my ears, but the sound was inside, behind the bone, inside my skull. I don't know how long I stood there, breathing fog, listening, trying to separate my thoughts from theirs. The air grew warmer, and I smelled it, something faint and sweet, like flowers long dead, crushed under wet leaves. A shadow passed through the mist, close enough that I felt its weight in the air. It brushed against my arm, so lightly that I thought I imagined it, but the warmth stayed. I whispered, "Who's there?" The fog answered. My voice came back to me, bent and broken, repeating the question in a dozen different tones. Then silence, a silence so deep it rang. Every drop of water, every breath, felt too loud. The world had stopped moving, except for me. I turned again, looking for the edge of the fog, the path, the trees that marked my way back. But the forest had changed. The shapes of the trunks were wrong. Too many, too close together. Their roots tangled like fingers, gripping at the earth, and between them a faint light. It flickered once, like a reflection, then vanished. I followed where it had been. The ground tilted slightly downhill, though I never felt myself walking down. The whispers were softer now, almost tender. They brushed my name again, stretching it, making it unfamiliar. Each syllable sounded older, like it had been said for centuries. I tried to remember how far I'd come. The memory blurred, like water smeared over ink. All I knew was that the air around me was thicker now, heavier. When I breathed in, it filled my lungs like smoke. When I exhaled, it hung in front of me, a pale shimmer, before folding back into fog. Then I heard it. A single word, clear this time. Not a whisper, but a voice. Stay. It wasn't angry. It wasn't pleading. Just final. I froze. My body obeyed before my mind did. Every muscle turned to glass. The fog shifted around me, slowly, like it was breathing. And then, without warning, everything went still again. No voice, no heartbeat, just a faint hiss of the mist moving against itself. I looked down. My footprints, gone. The ground was smooth, untouched, as if I'd never been there at all. And that's when I realized the path I came from was gone too. The trees pressed closer. The air trembled. The whispers began again, softer now, almost kind. I stood there, barely breathing, as they moved around me like a tide, each one brushing past my ear, carrying words I couldn't understand. Maybe they weren't meant to be. The fog thickened once more, and the forest swallowed the light. All that was left was the sound of my own breath and the quiet murmur of voices calling my name, over and over, until it no longer sounded like mine. The forest was still breathing, softly, like something asleep, but listening. Night had folded over the sky, a deep gray curtain heavy with mist. The air tasted like wet bark and iron. Every breath clung to my tongue. I walked slower now. The fog drifted low, parting around my legs as if afraid to touch me. Then I saw it, a faint glow between the trees, pale, thin, unsteady. At first, I thought it might be moonlight, but the moon was nowhere. And this light, it pulsed, not steady like fire, not wild like lightning, just alive. It flickered once, twice, then lingered, as if it was waiting for me to notice. My heart picked up, and the glow pulsed with it, in time. Beat, flash, beat, flash. I stood still, afraid to move, afraid not to. The forest leaned closer. Every branch seemed to bend inward, their tips pointing at the light, like they were drawn to it, or guarding it. The air around me thickened, filled with a faint humming, too soft a place, too deep to ignore. I took a step forward. The glow brightened. My pulse quickened. I could feel it, a vibration under my skin, like the forest was breathing through me. The closer I walked, the stranger the trees became. Their trunks twisted into shapes that shouldn't exist. Some bent at perfect angles. Others curved toward the light, their bark slick and wet, like they'd been sweating. I brushed one with my hand. It felt warm, almost human. The light flickered again, brighter now. It spilled to the fog like liquid glass, catching every droplet, turning the air into silver threads. I could smell it, ozone and something faintly sweet, like burnt leaves after rain. For a moment, I forgot to be afraid. It was beautiful, unreal, alive in a way nothing else was. But then, the rhythm changed. The pulse broke. The light began to stutter, quick and uneven, like it was panicking. I froze. Every shadow around me shifted. The trees groaned softly, their shapes bending closer, creaking like bones turning in the dark. And then a piece of the light moved. It peeled itself away from the glow, like a shadow detaching from its source. It was darker than the night around it, perfectly black, but fluid. It slid between the trunks, slow and deliberate, like it was studying the ground, listening for me. I didn't breathe. The air had weight now, thick enough to hold. The thing didn't walk. It just moved, effortlessly, as if distance didn't exist for it. My heartbeat echoed in my throat. The pale light behind the shadow flared, as if struggling against it, and then it dimmed. The shadow passed across it, and the glow shrank into itself, swallowed by its own pulse. I took a step back. The leaves underfoot cracked softly, too loud in the silence. The shadow stopped. It turned, not its head, not its body, just the direction of its presence. And I knew it saw me. There was no face, no eyes, just the faintest distortion, like heat rising from stone. It waited. So did I. The pale light flickered again behind it. and in that brief glow, I saw the outline of something stretched, thin as smoke, long as the path behind me. It moved again, not toward the light, but toward the sound of my breath. Slow, deliberate. The forest began to hum louder, a vibration low enough to rattle my ribs. Every branch quivered, every leaf trembled, and in the spaces between the noise, I heard my own heartbeat and the light pulsing to match it. Beat, step, beat, step. The shadow kept pace. I backed away. My feet found the old path, though it no longer felt like ground. It shifted under me, soft and slick, like moss-covered skin. I didn't run. Something inside me knew not to. The forest was watching, waiting. The pale light faded slowly behind the trees, its glow thinning into mist, until only the faint shimmer of it remained in the air. The shadow stopped at the edge of the light. It lingered there, half in, half out, as if deciding which side belonged to it. And then, just as quietly as it came, it stepped back into the fog. Gone. The forest sighed. The hum fell away. The mist loosened around me again. I stood there, staring into the emptiness, feeling the echo of the light still thumping in my chest. Somewhere deep between the trees, something still glowed, faint, pulsing in rhythm with my breath. Beat, flash, beat, flash. And I realized the light wasn't fading. It was following. The fog hadn't lifted. It just changed shape, thicker now, heavier, the kind that clings to your skin and doesn't let go. I could still see the faint shimmer of the pale light somewhere behind me, but it was fading fast, swallowed by the trees. The air had gone colder. Each breath left a cloud that drifted slow and gray before vanishing. I kept walking, not sure why. The path beneath my feet had softened again, like damp leaves pressed over hollow ground. Then I heard it, rustling, faint at first, then closer, a low, steady movement that circled the trees. Branches brushed together above me, leaves shifting like something large had passed through. I froze. The noise came again, behind me this time, then to the right, then both. It wasn't the wind. The air was too still. It felt organized, like footsteps disguised as leaves. I whispered, "Who's there?" My voice cracked softly, half caught in my throat, half swallowed by fog. And then it answered, not a voice, just the echo of mine, twisting between trunks, bouncing back in a tone that wasn't quite mine anymore. I took one step forward, and everything answered with rustling, a full circle of movement. Closing in, it felt like I had stepped into a breathing thing. Every part of the forest moved together. Every branch swayed toward me. Every leaf trembled. And then it stopped. All of it. Silence dropped so fast, I could feel it, like pressure behind my eyes, like my own pulse had been muffled. Even the fog stopped shifting, hanging perfectly still in the air. I waited, listening for anything, a bird, a drip, a crack. Nothing. It felt like the world was holding its breath. I tried to swallow. Even that sounded too loud. My hands were shaking. I pressed them against my coat to steady them, and the fabric rasped softly. That single noise, just that, made something deep inside me tighten. The silence wasn't empty. It was listening. I could feel it, watching. Every direction I turned looked the same gray walls of fog, the same dark outlines of trees. But something had changed in them. Their angles, their stillness, the way they leaned ever so slightly toward me. I took a slow step back, and the air moved with me, like something breathing just out of sight, matching my pace. I whispered again, softer this time, "I know you're there." Nothing answered, but the silence pressed closer, thick as water, making the inside of my ears hum. I wanted to move, to run, maybe, but even the thought of noise felt dangerous. So I stood still, listening to the silence listen back. It stretched. Seconds felt wrong here, too long, too thin. The air began to change temperature. A faint warmth brushed my neck, a breath that didn't belong to me. I turned. Nothing. Only the fog, and the faint shape of a tree that hadn't been there before. It was closer than the others. Too close. Its bark looked darker when the faint gray light, and something inside it seemed to move, a slow, pulsing shadow under the surface. I blinked, and it was still again. Behind me, the rustling started, just one sound this time. Soft, measured, one step, then another, then gone. The forest waited. And so did I. The fog brushed my face, cool and damp, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. When I exhaled, the air trembled. And somewhere in the distance, a faint rustle answered, like my breath had stirred awake. The trees no longer looked still. Their shapes were bending again, quietly this time, their branches pointing inward, toward me. I felt the first drop of something fall on my hand. Cold, not rain, thicker than that. I didn't look up. I didn't want to see what was above me. The rustling came again, closer now, all around, moving faster than before. And then it stopped, completely. The silence hit. So suddenly my ears rang. Even my heartbeat felt muted, like the forest had stolen its sound. Every sense screamed that I wasn't alone, that something was standing just behind me, so close I could feel the air move around it. I didn't turn. I couldn't. The fog pulsed once, a faint shimmer of movement, and then settled. I waited for a breath that never came, for movement that never arrived. And in that perfect, suffocating stillness, I understood. The rustling hadn't stopped. It was waiting, just like me. The fog had thinned by morning, but it hadn't gone. It clung low to the roots, curling between the moss and fallen leaves, moving like breath. The forest was quieter now. Even the rustling had gone. Only the faint hum of the air remained, like something beneath the soil was still dreaming. I walked until the trees began to change again. Their shapes twisted, their trunks bending into warped arches that leaned toward a single point. That's when I saw it. The tree. At first, it looked ordinary, tall, gray, streaked with lichen. But the closer I came, the more wrong it appeared. Its bark was split open, not cracked from age, not torn by weather. Split, cleanly, as if something inside had pushed outward, tearing its way free. The hollow ran deep into the trunk, so black it felt endless. Not an opening, but an invitation. I stopped a few feet away. The air here was warmer, still damp, but heavy, like the tree was breathing against me. The edges of the hollow pulsed faintly, dark veins beneath the bark, shimmering with a dull, wet light. I don't know why I leaned closer. Curiosity, maybe, or something else. A pull, quiet but certain, drawing me in. When I exhaled, the air moved back. The hollow seemed to breathe with me. I whispered, "Is someone there?" No answer, but the hum started. Low, soft, deep enough to tremble through my chest. It came from inside the hollow, steady as a heartbeat, ancient in rhythm. I crouched closer. The air was different here, thicker, sweet like sap and soil. It carried the faint scent of something burnt, or buried. The hum grew stronger the nearer I leaned. I could feel it beneath my skin, a vibration running through bone and breath. Then I saw a movement. Something faint, like the shimmer of heat above asphalt. It rippled across the blackness inside the tree. I reached out, just a little, just to feel the air there. My fingertips brushed the edge of the hollow. Rough bark, cold and slick. Then something brushed back. Not hard, not sudden, just a whisper of movement, a soft graze across my skin. Like fingers, but colder. I jerked away, heart stuttering. The hum stopped. Instantly, the forest froze with it. Even the fog seemed to hold its breath. I stared into the hollow, waiting for the movement to return. But it was empty, dark, still. Then the tree sighed. It was subtle, a deep exhale through the split bark, moist and hollow, like relief or disappointment. I stepped back. My legs trembled, but I couldn't take my eyes off it. The edges of the hollow pulsed once more, a faint shimmer under the surface, like the heartbeat of something trying to rest. The hum returned, quieter this time, barely a breath. I realized then it hadn't come from deep inside. It came from the wood itself, from the trunk, the roots, the ground beneath my feet. I pressed my palm to bark again, slowly this time. It felt alive. Not warm. Not cold. Alive. The pulse matched mine for a second. Then it didn't. It grew faster. Uneven. Desperate. I pulled away. The hum faltered, stuttering into silence again. The air thickened, and a faint tremor ran through the ground, as if something beneath was shifting. I stepped back once more. The split in the tree seemed wider now, the hollow deeper. The fog curled into it, disappearing without trace, consumed. I should have left then. I knew I should have. But I stayed, watching, listening. The hum had changed again. Fainter, sad almost. It reminded me of breathing through tears. For a moment, I thought I understood. The tree wasn't hollow because something had escaped. It was hollow because something was taken, and it was still waiting for it to return. The bark shivered under a passing wind. A low sigh rolled through its opening again. The sound of exhaustion, of regret, of something old remembering how to grieve. I whispered, "I'm sorry," and the forest seemed to listen. The hum faded completely. The air grew still. Even the fog hesitated before pulling back. The hollow no longer looked endless, just dark, just empty. But when I turned to leave, the faintest vibration brushed against my palm again. Gentle, lingering, like a goodbye. I didn't look back, but as I walked, I could feel the hum still beneath my feet. Faint, steady, following the rhythm of my heartbeat. Almost as if the forest had learned it, and was keeping it. The forest had changed again. The fog was thinner now, stretched into long ribbons between the trees, but the silence remained. A silence so deep it pressed against my ribs. Every breath felt heavy, every step too loud. The earth beneath me was damp, soft like a heartbeat under moss. I tried to walk lightly, tried to make less noise. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, behind me, perfectly in rhythm with mine. At first, I thought it was the echo, the forest throwing my sound back at me. But the steps didn't fade like echoes do. They stayed. Every time my foot touched the ground, another followed, a half beat behind. I slowed down. The steps slowed too. I stopped. They stopped. The air tightened, like the whole forest was holding its breath, waiting. I turned slowly, eyes straining through the pale light. Nothing moved, only fog and the faint shimmer of wet bark. I whispered, "Hello?" My voice came back, too quickly, too close. It sounded like me, but not quite, off by a breath. I waited, but the forest stayed still. I took one step backward. The echo came again, soft, wet, right behind me. My heart started to race. The rhythm quickened. So did the footsteps. I spun around. The sound stopped instantly. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Cold air brushed the back of my neck. The faint scent of wet earth and something old, like metal. I began walking faster. The echo followed, precise, relentless, like something learning how to move through me. Every step I took, it took two. Every pause, it paused, until I started running. Branches tore at my sleeves. Fog split apart in waves. The air rushed cold against my face. But behind me, the steps grew louder, faster. They weren't chasing me. They were matching me. Perfectly. I didn't dare look back. The trees blurred past, their shapes warping as I moved. Tall, thin, endless. Each trunk looked identical, and yet not. I started noticing something strange. When I turned my head, the trees seemed to mirror my movements, leaning in the same direction, twisting in rhythm with me. I slowed again, breath catching. My chest burned. The footsteps slowed too. Right behind me, close enough that I felt the air shift. I turned and the forest changed. Every tree was standing still, every branch silent. But something was wrong with the ground. Pale patches of moisture reflected faint light, like mirrors hidden under the dirt. When I moved, they shimmered, and in each one, a shadow moved the same way I did. Not an echo, a reflection. The fog caught light in strange ways, bending it, bouncing it. Everywhere I looked, there I was, a dozen pale shapes in the mist mimicking me. When I raised my hand, they raised theirs. When I breathed, they did too, and then they didn't. The reflections froze. their heads still turned toward me, their hands still raised, but their movement stopped. Only mine continued. I blinked. They didn't. Something inside my chest began to ache, a pulse that no longer matched theirs. I took one step forward. The echoes started again. Dozens of footsteps now, all slightly off rhythm, colliding in a soft, trembling chorus. The fog shimmered with movement, shapes walking just beyond sight, not chasing, not fleeing, just walking, as if the forest itself had learned to copy me. I whispered, "Stop." And it did. The silence returned, heavy, absolute. Then a single step behind me. Slow, wet, deliberate. I turned sharply and saw myself. Not clearly, just the outline of a figure, standing in the mist where I had stood seconds ago, its head tilted slightly, the same way mine did when I was afraid. I blinked, and it blinked too, but when I stepped forward, it didn't. It stayed still. Then it took one slow, heavy step toward me. The ground shuddered faintly beneath my feet. The air vibrated, a low hum, like the hollow tree still breathing somewhere far behind me. I stepped back, so did it, in perfect rhythm again. Panic surged through me, a cold that reached bone. I turned and ran, not looking, not thinking. The forest blurred into streaks of gray and black. Every sound stretched thin until all became one. Footsteps, breath, heart, hum, all beating together. And then, suddenly, the ground disappeared beneath me. I stumbled forward, catching myself on my hands. The forest fell quiet. No footsteps, no echo, no hum. Just me, kneeling in the fog, hands pressed into wet earth. When I looked up, every tree was still again, every reflection gone, but the air it still carried rhythm. A faint echo, far away, walking in the same direction I had run. Not following, just continuing, as if I'd left a part of myself behind. And it hadn't stopped walking yet. The air was colder that morning, but not cold enough for ice. The trees were still dripping from the night's mist, leaves slick and dark, the earth soft underfoot. I'd been walking for hours, the fog thinning just enough to see a few paces ahead. That's when I saw it, a pale shimmer cutting through the forest floor. At first, I thought it was water, but when I came closer, I realized the stream was frozen solid, a perfect, glassy sheet stretching to the woods like a mirror left out in the open. No frost touched the grass around it. No wind, no sign of winter, just ice. I knelt beside it, pressing my fingers against the surface. It was colder than it should have been, sharp enough to sting. The air above it smelled faintly metallic, like snow that hadn't fallen yet. Under the surface, shadows drifted, pale shapes moving slow, as if floating in thick smoke beneath the glass. I leaned closer. They weren't fish. They weren't anything I could name. Each shape curved, soft, blurred the edges, almost human, but not quite. I whispered into the fog, "Is this real?" My voice felt swallowed by the cold. Only silence answered, a heavy, frozen kind that hummed in my ears. The shapes below the ice stilled, as if they had heard me. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the ice trembled, just slightly. A faint vibration ran beneath my hand, and I felt it pulse through my fingertips like something living underneath. I pulled back quickly. My breath fogged the surface, and when it cleared, my reflection stared up at me. Except it wasn't right. The eyes looked wrong. Too dark, too still. They blinked. A half second after I did, I froze. The stream seemed to breathe. A soft ripple shimmered across the ice, though the surface didn't break. The pale shapes below began to drift again, closer this time. I could see them clearer now, the fog bending light across their outlines. Hands, or what looked like them, dozens pressing just beneath the ice, fingers stretched toward the surface. I stepped back. The ice creaked under my boot, a slow, aching sound that felt too deep, like it came from inside the earth. Then the shapes shifted, all at once, moving toward me. The air went still. Even the trees seemed to stop swaying. I took another step, heart thudding against the quiet. The ice trembled again, a faint vibration running the length of the stream. A thin crack whispered across the surface, curling like a vein of light beneath my feet. I didn't dare move. I just watched as my reflection rippled, eyes widening, face warping, until I barely recognized it. The version of me beneath the ice was smiling, not with my mouth, but with its eyes, those same dark, hollow eyes that blinked just a little too late. I whispered, "Stop." The hum beneath the ice grew louder, not in sound, but in pressure, like it was pressing against my bones. The pale shapes swirled faster, their outlines blurring into one another, a whirlpool of faint white light beneath the frozen stream. And then silence again. Everything stilled, even my breath. The reflection on the surface looked calm now, peaceful, but when I blinked, it didn't. It just kept staring, unmoving, with those eyes that didn't belong to me. A soft wind passed over the stream. The ice shimmered faintly, and for a heartbeat, I saw my reflection behind the surface, as though I were trapped inside it, looking up from beneath. The pale shapes floated closer again, forming a slow circle beneath the glass. Not threatening, almost curious, and for a strange moment, I wanted to reach back, to touch them, to know what it felt like to move like that. Slow, silent, weightless under the ice. But the thought scared me, more than anything had before. I stood up quickly, my reflection shifting back into place. The ice stopped trembling. The forest seemed to breathe again. I backed away until the shimmer disappeared behind fog. Even then, I could feel it, that cold hum, buzzing low in my chest, as if something beneath the frozen stream was still waiting, still watching. And sometimes when I blink, I swear I see that reflection again, in the corners of dark windows or puddles after rain, always still, always patient, with eyes that aren't mine. The air was still, thick with damp and the faint sweetness of moss. I'd lost track of how long I'd been walking. The fog had thinned, but the forest felt tighter somehow. The trees pressed closer, their trunks darker, their roots curling like veins beneath the soil. Then I noticed it, a hum, low, almost like a vibration under my breath. I thought it was the wind at first, threading through the branches, but the air didn't move. It came from the trees. Each one I passed seemed to carry it, a faint tone, steady, almost familiar. I stopped beside one of the older trunks, its bark pale and cracked like dry skin. When I leaned closer, the sound deepened, shifting into something that almost formed words. I pressed my palm against the bark. It felt warm, too warm. The hum grew clearer. A whisper, my name, so faint I wasn't sure if I imagined it. But when I pressed my ear to the wood, the forest seemed to breathe. It whispered again, my voice, but softer, like an echo I'd forgotten. I stepped back, heart tight in my chest. The next tree hummed too, then another, each one carrying that same low tone, weaving together into something that sounded like a song without rhythm. I moved from trunk to trunk, listening. Some whispered phrases I couldn't make out. Others were clearer, pieces of sentences, half-formed thoughts. Don't turn back. Keep walking. It's colder behind you. The words seemed to slip in and out of each other, as if the trees shared one long breath. Then I heard something different. Another voice. Not mine. Deeper. Heavier. It didn't whisper. It spoke. A slow, dragging tone from somewhere beneath the bark. I couldn't understand the words, but they felt familiar, like something I'd once said in a dream. I leaned closer. The scent of the tree filled my nose, wet with sap, something faintly metallic beneath. The whisper rose again, pressing against my ear. This time I understood it. You've been here before. I pulled away, but the trees kept humming. Everywhere I turned, the sound followed. My breath felt shallow. The hum was no longer faint. It vibrated to the ground, through the air, through me. I whispered, "Who's there?" The forest answered with silence. Then the nearest trunk shuddered. A thin crack ran through its bark, splitting it open just enough to release a breath, a dry, hollow exhale. The whisper that came after wasn't a word. It was my laugh. Not now, not here, but from some time before. A memory I couldn't place. I stumbled back, looking from tree to tree. They were still, but I could feel them, leaning, listening. The The hum began to fade again, slipping into a lower register, like a heartbeat muffled underwater. I could almost match its rhythm with my own. For a moment, I thought I could understand it, like the forest was trying to tell me something I had once known, then forgotten. I touched another trunk. The bark felt soft where it should have been rough. Under my hand, I felt something move, slow, like breath beneath skin. The whisper came again, right against my ear. "We remember you." I froze. The air around me tightened, thick and heavy with sap and soil. The forest had grown quiet. No leaves rustled. No wind passed. Just that hum, low, deep, filling my bones. Every tree seemed to lean in, their trunks tilted slightly toward me, roots stretching faintly through the mist. It felt like the entire forest was listening. I backed away, but the hum followed, shifting from ear to ear like it was inside my head. I covered my ears. It didn't stop. The trees whispered my name again, so softly I almost missed the rest of the sentence. "Come closer." I ran my fingers along one last trunk. It pulsed under my touch, once, then again, and from deep inside the wood, I heard my own voice whisper back, "Don't." The hum broke. The forest fell silent. Only the fog moved now, curling slow around the roots. The air was cold again, but as I turned to leave, I caught it. One last faint whisper carried by the wind. My name, drawn out, fading deeper into the trees. I didn't answer. I just walked. But even now, when the wind brushes past bark, I can still hear them, those low voices hiding in the wood, humming quietly to themselves, like they're waiting for me to listen again. The morning felt stretched thin. Gray light pooled between the trees, the kind that doesn't belong to any hour. I remember stepping onto the trail because it looked clear, worn, safe, a narrow line of dirt, cutting to the forest floor, soft with fallen leaves and the scent of wet bark. I thought, finally, a way out. The path wound between the trees. Gentle at first, it felt like it had purpose. Each curve promised an end I couldn't see. I followed quietly, my footsteps barely disturbing the ground. Mist drifted between the trunks, curling around my legs like it was trying to slow me down. After a while, something began to change. The trees leaned differently, closer, like they'd shifted while I wasn't looking. Their branches twisted together above me, knitting into a darker canopy that dimmed the pale light. I looked back and paused. The trail behind me was gone. The dirt I'd walked on a moment ago was covered now, with leaves that looked untouched. No footprints, no sign of where I'd come from. For a second, I thought I'd just lost direction, so I turned forward again. But the path ahead looked different, narrower, as though it had moved too. I kept walking. Each step felt longer than the last, like the ground stretched beneath my feet. The forest hummed quietly, not with life, but with stillness. The trees were closer now, their trunks uneven, bent toward me. I brushed my hand along one. The bark was damp, almost breathing. I took another step, and the forest shifted. It wasn't sudden, not like a snap. It was subtle, a small rearranging, just enough to make me uncertain. A tree that had been on my left was now in front of me. A patch of moss that had caught the light was gone entirely. The air felt heavier, colder. I stopped, tried to steady my breathing. But when I turned again, the trail behind me wasn't just covered. It was different. The roots were wrong. The trees were older. The entire forest looked like it had been standing for 100 years longer than before. My chest tightened. I tried to retrace my steps, but no direction made sense anymore. The ground seemed to pulse beneath my boots. Not moving, just remembering. Every step I took forward made the forest shift slightly around me. The path curved left, then right, then straight again, but never in the same way twice. I whispered to myself, trying to mark the sound of my own voice as a point to return to, but the forest echoed it back wrong, slower, out of rhythm, like something repeating it from far away. I started walking faster. Branches brushed against my arms, wet with mist. The air carried a faint static, like the charge before a storm. I glanced behind me once more and froze. The trees had rearranged again. The path split in two directions now, both identical, both leading deeper into places that hadn't existed a moment before. The forest wasn't following me. It was reacting. I could feel it, like it wanted me to move, to choose. The air vibrated faintly, a low hum threading through the silence. Each breath felt heavier than the last. I picked a direction, any direction, and walked. The ground softened beneath me, turning slick, then dry again. Shadows slid across the dirt, though nothing above me moved. I walked until my legs ached, until I was sure I had to find something, a clearing, a sign, a sound. But when I finally stopped, the trail I stood on wasn't trail at all. It ended abruptly in a wall of trees so dense I couldn't see through. No wind, no birds, no sound. I turned back, but the path was gone again. Just forest, endless and unfamiliar. The fog crept closer. It felt thicker here, like it was holding its breath with me. I tried to listen for anything familiar, but all I heard was a faint echo of my own footsteps, coming from somewhere ahead. I waited. They stopped when I did. The forest leaned in again, quiet, patient. The path was gone, but somehow I knew if I moved, it would return. Different, waiting. So I stood there, frozen in place, trying not to breathe too loud, because every step I took rewrote the forest. And somewhere in the fog, it was learning how to walk like me. The forest hadn't changed, but something about the air felt wrong. It was colder now, too still, like everything had paused to listen. I remember stopping, hand resting against a damp tree trunk, breathing quietly so I wouldn't disturb whatever waited above. The leaves were heavy with dew, dripping slowly onto the ground. Each drop felt louder than it should have been. I tilted my head just slightly, and that's when I saw it. A flicker. Between the branches, a faint, pale glow. Two small lights, suspended in the dark canopy. Unmoving. Blinking. I froze. At first, I thought it might be reflection, moonlight caught in wet bark. But the light blinked again. Once. Twice. Slowly. Eyes. They were eyes. I couldn't look away. They stared down at me, steady, measured, as if they'd been waiting for me to notice. A soft hum filled my ears, not from the forest, but from inside my head, like pressure before a storm. I blinked, and when I opened my eyes again, they were closer. Not much, just enough that I knew they had moved. Branches didn't creak. Leaves didn't rustle. But somehow, the distance between us had changed. I took a slow step back. My heel pressed into wet soil. It sank with a quiet squelch. The eyes blinked again. And again they were closer. My throat tightened. The air carried a faint metallic taste, like rain on rust. My skin prickled, as if something unseen brushed past me. I whispered to myself, just one word, barely audible, no. And that's when I saw another pair. To the left, hidden between the leaves. Smaller, lower, then another, and another. Dozens. All still, all open. Every branch above me was lined with them. The forest that seemed empty was now watching. They didn't move, didn't blink together. Each one moved on its own rhythm, like they were thinking. Individually, I wanted to run, but my legs felt heavy, as though the soil had risen to hold me in place. I tried to breathe quietly, but even my breath sounded too loud. Too alive. I shifted my weight. A single leaf cracked beneath my boot. Every eye blinked. At once, and then opened wider. The canopy above seemed to pulse. Dark shapes stirred in the branches, but I couldn't tell where one ended and another began. There was no outline, no form, just movement and the faintest tremor of something large, stirring without sound. The forest floor glowed faintly with reflected light, as if all those eyes were shining brighter now. I took another step back. The trees loomed taller, stretching above me until I couldn't see the sky. I told myself not to look again, that if I didn't acknowledge them, they might fade, disappear. But curiosity, it pressed against my chest. I looked up, and the eyes were gone, only the dark canopy. Still, silent. The absence of them was worse, because I didn't hear them leave. Didn't feel a single thing move. Just silence, thick and waiting. I turned slowly, trying to see between the trunks. Every direction looked the same: black leaves, thin fog, and the faint hum of my own heartbeat in my ears. Then, behind me, a flicker, 2 small lights, closer than before. I didn't turn fully, just shifted my eyes to the edge of my vision. They blinked again, and more appeared beside them, rows of them, each one faint, but glowing just enough to outline the shapes hanging among the branches. They were low now, too low. I took a careful step forward. Another, and another. The air felt thick, like breathing through fabric. Every few steps, I glanced up. The eyes followed, always at the same distance. Never advancing, never retreating. Just watching. I whispered again, barely forming the words. "What do you want?" No answer. Just a faint sound of leaves brushing together, like something shifting its weight above me. I didn't move again, didn't speak. I waited until the silence grew deep enough to press against my skin. Then, one by one, the eyes began to close. The forest dimmed slowly until there was nothing left but the faintest afterglow burning behind my eyelids. When I finally looked up again, the canopy was empty. The mist was still, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't left. Just retreated higher, deeper, where I couldn't see, watching, waiting for me to look up again. It started as a thin veil, curling around the roots and rocks like breath made visible. The air was cool, too still for morning, too heavy for dusk. I remember the trees first, how their edges blurred as a fog thickened between them. Soft at first, then dense enough to hide the space a few steps ahead. I could still hear the leaves above me, still feel the damp earth under my boots. But something in the air changed. There was a vibration, a faint hum, low and steady, rolling through the mist like it had a pulse. It wasn't sound. It was inside the sound, a trembling that sank into my chest, settling beneath my ribs. I stopped walking, waited, listened. The hum deepened, shifted tone, almost melodic. Each note pressed against my skin, like air turned into water. Each breath grew heavier. I whispered into the fog, just to see how far my voice would carry. It didn't. The mist swallowed it whole. Only the hum answered. It stretched between the trees, vibrating through bark and soil. The ground felt alive beneath my feet. I took a single step forward, and the fog pulsed. Not wind, not movement, a rhythm, as if the entire forest had drawn breath at once. Shapes began to form in the whiteness, soft outlines, indistinct but watching. They wavered like reflections in disturbed water, tall, thin, just beyond what I could clearly see. Every time I blinked, they shifted, a little closer, a little sharper. The humming deepened again, filling my head like static. It didn't hurt. It only made it hard to think. Each inhale came slower than the last. The fog pressed against my face, cool, damp, smelling faintly of iron and moss. I raised my hand just to see it disappear. My fingers vanished at the wrist, swallowed by pale gray. Something moved past them, a ripple, too quick to be air. I pulled back, but the mist followed, dragging against my skin like fabric clinging in the rain. The vibration grew louder now, not in my ears, in my bones. Every breath hummed. Every heartbeat echoed with it. It wasn't around me anymore. It was inside me. I tried to move faster, but the fog resisted. Each step felt thick, as though I were walking underwater. The world had weight, invisible weight. Even sound became slower. My breathing came back to me a moment too late, like an echo playing from somewhere far away. The outlines were still there, dozens now, faint but forming shape. One of them leaned, tilting its head. Or maybe it was just a misfolding. I couldn't tell anymore. The hum rose, turning sharp, almost like whispering, but not made of words. I closed my eyes. It didn't help. The fog was still there behind my eyelids, vibrating in pale light. A single thought pressed through the noise. Keep walking. I pushed forward, arms heavy, legs caught in invisible drag. Each step felt wrong, like gravity had tilted, like the air was pulling me sideways. The path beneath me was gone. Only the hum remained, marking direction by pressure, not sight. When I finally stopped again, I realized I couldn't tell which way I'd come from. The trees were gone. The world was just fog, endless, humming fog. I could feel shapes circling now, their motion disturbing the mist in subtle waves. I didn't see them move, but I felt them pass. Close. Too close. One brushed my shoulder. The air tightened. My vision flickered white for an instant, like static behind glass. Then it was gone. I turned slowly, but there was nothing, just the humming. It pulsed once more, then broke. Silence. The fog stilled, hanging motionless in the cold air. My chest ached where the vibration had been, as if something had just stepped out of me. For a moment, I thought I could hear my own pulse again, steady, fragile, human. The shapes were fading. Their outlines melted back into the mist, like the forest had decided to breathe again. The weight around my body began to lift. I took one step forward, then another. The air was lighter. I could almost see the ground again. But when I stopped to listen, I realized the hum hadn't vanished. It was softer now, deeper, almost beneath me, running through the soil, following, like the fog had learned my rhythm, and wasn't ready to let it go. The fog thinned just enough to show me something solid. A cabin, small, secluded between two leaning pines. It was dark and damp, yet strangely polished, almost untouched by time. The door hung slightly ajar. I stopped a few steps away, feeling the earth beneath my boots shift subtly under each weight. The forest had grown quiet. Too quiet. The air smelled faintly of smoke, though the chimney held no trace of fire. And yet the scent lingered, warm, dry, familiar. I stepped forward, footfall soft on moss and fallen leaves. Each step seemed to awaken the cabin, a tiny vibration humming through the floorboards. They whispered beneath me, thin, brittle, alive. I reached the threshold. The door barely moved when I nudged it. Inside, pale light filtered through cracked curtains, casting long shadows across the room. Everything was in place. Furniture arranged neatly, chairs tucked in, table set as if expecting someone to return. Dust motes floated in the air, but not enough to settle, though it smelled faintly sweet, like old pine polished with care. I ran my fingers along the table edge, smooth, cold, almost slippery. A chair creaked softly behind me. I turned. Nothing. The air shifted. A breath, light as silk, brushed against my ear. I froze. There was no one there, only the subtle pulse of the cabin itself. I walked slowly across the floor, the boards groaning underfoot, yet nothing else moved. The fireplace was empty. Ashes were swept clean, but the air smelled faintly of smoke, like someone had left just moments before. The hum returned, soft, vibrating through the walls. It made the room feel smaller, the ceiling lower, the shadows deeper. I glanced at the table. A cup, white porcelain, empty, sitting precisely at the edge of the light. I touched it, cold. I moved to the corner. Books lined the shelves. Their spines faded, titles blurred. I ran my hand over them. Paper thin, brittle, whispering under my touch. The cabin smelled of old wood, but there was something else, something faint, metallic, like blood mixed with resin. I paused in the center of the room. The hum softened, then disappeared. Silence stretched so thick it felt like a weight pressing down. A shadow shifted at the edge of my vision. I turned. Nothing. The faintest rustle came from the fireplace. A whisper movement, like someone exhaling slowly. I told myself it was a wind, or my imagination. But the air was still. Even the fog outside held its breath. I stepped toward the doorway. The floorboard sighed beneath my weight, long, low, complaining. Every sound echoed. I stopped, hearing my own heartbeat in the quiet. And then it came again, that faint breath brushing my neck. Closer this time. Warm, soft, impossible. I spun around. Empty. The room seemed to lean in. Walls closer. Shadows reaching for me. The hum returned, gentle, insistent, vibrating through the air and floor, a pulse that matched my own heart. I backed toward the door, touched the handle. Cold metal, smooth, anchoring me in impossible stillness. I stepped outside. The cabin remained behind me, silent, immaculate. The fog curled around it, softening edges, swallowing corners. The forest seemed normal again. The wind moved through the trees, rustling leaves, shaking loose the mist. Yet something lingered. A warmth, like someone had just been there. A faint hum in my chest. A whisper I couldn't place. The echo of breath that hadn't belonged to me. I glanced back once. The door was closed now. The cabin looked abandoned again. But I knew it wasn't. Not really. Somewhere inside, it was still waiting. Waiting for someone to hear the hum, to feel the breath, to notice the whisper that no one else could. I didn't go back. I walked into the fog, leaving the silent cabin behind, but carrying its quiet with me, a soft, impossible weight pressing against my chest, against my memory, against the pulse of my own heartbeat. The forest swallowed it, but it didn't disappear. It waits. The clearing opened before me like a pale wound in the forest. Fog hovered low over the grass, softening the edges of roots and rocks. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and pine, but something else lingered, a metallic tang that pricked at my senses. I stepped carefully, footfalls muted, breath shallow, and that's when I noticed it. A shadow, tall, too thin to be human. It moved across the clearing with slow, deliberate grace, not rushing, not hiding. It didn't make a sound, yet I felt its presence pressing against my skin, a cool brush of air at my back, like the forest itself was exhaling. I froze. The shadow stopped. I dared to turn my head. It remained perfectly still, a dark silhouette against the fog. I looked away, and when I glanced back, it had shifted, a step closer, slightly taller, as though it stretched while I wasn't watching. My heart thumped, hard, each beat echoing in my chest, matching the rhythm of the clearing itself. I moved forward, slowly, barely daring to breathe. The shadow followed, its movement smooth, unbroken, patient. Every time I dared to look, it froze. Every time I turned away, it stretched, elongating like ink poured across a mist. The grass bent under its weight, or perhaps under its will. A faint ripple moved the fog around it, distorting the edges of trees, pulling the clearing slightly toward itself. I whispered softly to test the sound. No echo returned, only the faint brushing of unseen air. I stopped again. The shadow lingered at the edge of my vision, tall and patient, a figure made of night itself. I tried to measure its distance. Impossible. Every glance revealed something different. Closer, further, twisted. I took another step. The grass hissed beneath my boots, moisture clinging to my skin. The shadow responded, moving, stretching, a silent follower. I dared not run. Movement would betray me. Breath too loud would summon it closer. The clearing itself seemed to pulse. Soft light flickered through the fog, reflected off wet leaves and damp bark. The shadow didn't reflect, didn't bend. It simply existed, fluid and patient, waiting for me to falter. A branch snapped somewhere behind me. I flinched. The shadow froze, then stretched again once I looked away. It felt alive, not merely a patch of darkness, but intent, a silent that followed, calculating, always just out of reach. I whispered again, words meant for the wind, for no one else. Nothing answered, only the faint brushing of the shadow against the clearing's edges. I circled slowly, trying to gauge its boundaries. Every turn distorted the space. The fog thickened in some areas, thinned in others. Trees leaned where they hadn't before. Shadows pooled unnaturally on the ground. Yet the figure stayed, tall, thin, waiting. A bead of sweat ran down my temple. I could hear my heartbeat now, drumming louder than any other sound. I took one cautious step backward. Grass bent under my weight. The shadow mirrored me, closer than before. The clearing felt smaller, the fog heavier, the air thicker. I realized then that the shadow didn't chase. It followed, measured, perfectly synchronized with my movements. It was patient enough to let me exhaust my fear, then stretch a little closer while I tried to regain composure. I wanted to look away, to close my eyes, But curiosity kept me tethered, as though the clearing itself demanded I witness it. I stopped completely, breath shallow, heart hammering. The shadow froze. For a moment, the clearing held its breath, and then slowly it stretched, a single movement, almost imperceptible, but enough to remind me that it was not a thing to flee from, but a presence to endure. I stepped forward again. The shadow followed, silently, unchanging. I whispered into the fog, but only my own words returned twisted and quiet, like echoes from beneath the earth. The clearing hummed with quiet tension, shadows shifting in rhythm with my heartbeat. I realized I could not outrun it. I could not see it fully. I could only move, measured, careful, through the fog and grass, with the shadow patiently tracing every step. It waits, always, and I can feel it, just beyond vision, mirroring me with every step I take. The forest was darker than usual. Mist clung to the low branches, weaving through roots and rocks, soft and damp against my hands. The air smelled faintly of wet leaves and something else, metallic, distant, like iron mixed with earth. A faint glow caught my eye. Underbrush parted slightly, and there it was, a lantern, old, battered, yet its flame pulsed with a calm, steady light. I reached down. The metal was cold beneath my fingers, slightly sticky with sap or dew. When I lifted it, the glow deepened, casting long, pale shadows across the ground. The forest seemed to hold its breath. I lifted the lantern higher. Its light shimmered across the fog, revealing shapes that had been hidden before. I blinked. They moved, thin, wavering outlines, too quick to fully see, yet deliberate in motion. Each seemed to drift closer, following the light, hovering just beyond the reach of recognition. The air felt heavier, warm and damp on my cheeks. The soft rustle of leaves mixed with faint whispers of the wind. I took a step forward. The shapes mirrored my movement, closing the distance slowly, deliberately. The light flickered. A shadow stretched across the fog, coiling and uncoiling like smoke. I breathed slowly. The lantern felt heavier in my hands, its warmth pressing through my palms. It illuminated the mist in soft waves, touching branches and rocks in pale, trembling patches. The shapes moved closer. Not fast, not threatening, just drawn, curious, perhaps as I was of them. A small breeze moved through the clearing, carrying the scent of wet pine and moss. The shapes shimmered, like reflections in shallow water, never still, always bending toward the light. I tried to make sense of them, figures or fragments, humans or memories of them. The air felt dense with possibility, each inhale carrying a hum of quiet anticipation. The lantern flickered again. The forest around me shifted. Branches leaned closer, the mist twisted around roots and rocks, and shadows grew longer, sharper. I moved the lantern slowly. Light touched the shapes. They swirled in response, flowing toward me like liquid in slow motion. The sound of my own breathing suddenly felt loud. Footsteps on soft earth echoed too clearly, though I was alone. I held the lantern closer. Its light trembled against my chest. The shapes paused. I could see them more clearly now, thin and faint, as though made of smoke or memory. They were watching, curious, patient. A small rustle came from the leaves above. The shapes quivered, mirroring the motion, their edges blending into the fog. I felt a strange pull, like the lantern guided not just me, but them, drawn forward, closer, each flicker revealing more, then less, as if the light itself was breathing, inhaling, exhaling, tugging the forest into quiet rhythm. I tried to take another step. The fog thickened, curling around my boots. The shapes drifted forward, circling, following the sway of the lantern. I lifted it higher. Its glow shimmered against the mist, revealing hidden contours of the forest, twisted roots, leaning trees, and the shifting, soft outlines that always moved closer with every heartbeat. The air was alive with tension. Every inhale carried faint whispers I couldn't understand. Every movement of the light brought the shapes nearer, slipping through the fog like shadows in liquid. I felt my chest tighten. The lantern pulsed against my palm, warm, fragile, insistent. For a moment, I considered letting it go, but the shapes responded, leaning forward, curious, drawn, and I knew they only existed in the presence of light. I held it higher, and the forest shimmered around me, alive in the glow. Shapes moving, twisting, drifting, always toward me, never touching, always watching, always waiting. And I realized that with the lantern in my hand, I was no longer just a wanderer. I was a participant in the slow, quiet dance between light and shadow in a forest that had always been alive, even before I arrived. The lantern flickered again, and the shapes continued their approach, soft, deliberate, and endless. The forest floor shifted beneath my feet, soft moss giving way to something lower, like the earth itself had sunk. A path appeared, sunken, hollowed, lined by leaning trees whose roots curled around the edges like fingers guarding a tunnel. Mist clung to the ground, curling upward in pale tendrils. I stepped forward. Each footfall echoed unnaturally, reverberating to the hollow path as though the forest itself was swallowing sound, then spitting it back in whispers. The air smelled of wet earth and decayed leaves, but underneath, a metallic tang lingered, sharp, faint, pressing at my senses. A low hum pulsed from the earth below, soft at first, almost melodic, then insistent, vibrating through my chest. I bent closer to ground, trying to locate the source. A whisper followed, indistinct, coaxing, breath brushing against the hollow walls. The words weren't words. They were intention, urging me deeper. I stepped further down the path. The walls of soil and roots pressed inward slightly, the mist thickening around my legs. Each movement stirred the fog, sending tiny droplets brushing my skin, cool and damp. The echo of my steps shifted strangely, sometimes ahead of me, sometimes behind, as if the hollow path had its own rhythm. It was alive. Shadows pulled along the edges, thin and reaching, stretching toward the light that barely penetrated the canopy. They didn't move of their own accord, yet I felt them follow, leaning closer with every hesitant step. The whispering grew louder, a soft vibration through the floor, through mist, into my chest. Something beneath me shifted, like the path itself was breathing, alive, patient, waiting. I paused. The forest pressed around me, quiet except for hum and the whispers. I could feel the weight of it, like the earth itself was holding me down, inviting me forward and warning me to stop at once. A thin root snagged my boot. I stumbled slightly, and the whispering rose sharply, hissing through the hollow like wind in a cave. The mist thickened, touching my cheeks with icy fingers. I forced myself to take another step. The echo shifted again. My heartbeat joined in its rhythm, thundering against my ribs. The path seemed endless, curving deeper into the trees, vanishing under mist, but still pulling me forward. Something brushed my hand. I flinched, thinking a branch had reached out, but the air was empty. The sensation lingered, soft, almost deliberate, like a fingertip grazing my skin from below the soil itself. The forest seemed to lean inward, roots stretched down like claws, soil pressing closer to form a hollow corridor. I felt the pulse of the path, matching my own heartbeat, pressing a quiet insistence that I continue. I whispered into the mist. Nothing returned, only the echo of my voice bouncing strangely, twisting and breaking against the walls of earth. I tried to look back. The entrance had vanished. The trees shifted in impossible angles, their shadows pooling in shapes that felt like faces, watching, waiting, judging. The hollow path pulsed with intention. Each step I took reverberated through the tunnel. Each breath seemed to feed the whispering beneath. I could smell damp soil and cold iron, taste a faint tang of fear on my tongue. The further I went, the more the forest seemed to close around me. The canopy above tightened, letting in only faint specks of pale light. Mist clung to my chest, drifting upward into the hollow, wrapping me in quiet tension. I reached the midpoint. The hum beneath my feet rose sharply, thrumming in rhythm with my pulse. The whispers urged me onward, soft, deliberate, insistent. I stopped, held my breath. The hollow path waited. It waited with a patience older than the trees, older than the mist, pressing softly against my senses. I knew then, this path was not meant to be walked casually. It wanted attention, wanted me to notice the whispers, to feel the pulse beneath my feet, to acknowledge its presence. I stepped forward again. Mist brushed my legs, Echoes chased my feet, and the whispering followed, inviting, coaxing, a voice beneath the soil that could not be ignored. The path continued, endless and hollow, its pull quiet but unyielding, and I followed, carrying the echo of the forest and the weight of its whispers deeper into the unknown. The forest breathed around me. Leaves trembled in the pale light, rustling softly as if alive. The air smelled damp, a mixture of moss and wet soil, but underneath a faint metallic tang lingered, tingling against my nostrils. I paused. The rustling shifted. Not random, patterned, deliberate. Every movement of the leaves carried a breath that wasn't mine. I drew a slow, careful inhale. It echoed through the forest, and in response, a whisper returned. Faint, unsteady. My name, repeated softly, like the wind had learned to speak. Branches swayed as if bowing. Shadows leaned closer, stretching along the ground. The forest felt aware, alive, observing me. I stepped forward. Leaves brushed my legs, wet with dew. Each exhale of wind carried more whispers, layered and overlapping. Some words my own, some entirely strange. I stopped again. The voices grew clearer. Faint syllables, echoing from every direction, woven into the soft hum of the forest itself. A branch cracked somewhere above me. The rustling paused. Silence pressed against my ears, heavy, waiting. Then as I breathed, the forest exhaled with me. 1,000 tiny breaths, all whisper my name, all moving with me, pressing in just enough to make me shiver. I moved slowly, feet sinking into damp earth. The shadows shifted. Mist drifted low to the ground, curling around roots, stones, and the soles of my boots. The leaves above quivered. The rustling became a rhythm, matched to my own heartbeat. The forest felt close, too close. Each step stirred voices, echoing in waves across the underbrush. Faint breaths brushing my neck. I dared not turn too quickly, afraid I might see the shape of them, though I could feel their presence between every branch and root. I whispered my own name, softly, testing the sound. It returned, warped and distant, from somewhere I could not see. The mist thickened, clingy and cool against my skin. The forest seemed to breathe with me now, a slow inhale, a trembling exhale. Each rustle of leaves was a whisper, a quiet pulse of the unseen. A faint hum joined the rhythm, vibrating to the ground beneath my feet. I felt it in my chest, like the earth itself was alive, moving with the wind, with the forest with me. I stopped in a small clearing. Mist curled around my ankles, leaves brushing my hands as I lowered them. The voices softened, becoming more distant, yet still present, breathing in time with mine. I leaned closer to the damp soil. Each inhale carried faint whispers. Every exhale returned them, folding into the forest, folding back to me. I was part of it now, intertwined with the rustling, the unseen breaths, the quiet awareness of the trees. A single leaf fell from above. It floated gently, spinning, landing at my feet. The whispers paused, then resumed in a gentle wave, soft, continuous, like the heartbeat of the forest itself. I walked slowly, deliberately, letting each footstep disturb the mist, letting each breath mingle with the unseen voices. The forest moved around me, curving branches, shifting shadows, rustling, breathing, whispering. I realized I was not alone, though nothing visible accompanied me. I was never alone. The forest observed, exhaled, breathed with me, echoing my presence in soft, repetitive whispers. Each step carried me deeper into the rhythm, the quiet unease, the gentle, insistent breath that filled the leaves, the branches, and the hollow spaces in between. I slowed, let the whispers move around me, let the forest breathe, and for a long moment I was suspended in a hush of rustling leaves, alive to every unseen breath, every echo of my name. The forest thinned here, and pale light touched the ground in uneven patches. I stumbled onto a small pond, still and dark, its surface smooth like glass. The air smelled of wet stone and moss, a faint tang of something metallic that made my skin prickle. I leaned closer, expecting to see the reflection of trees, the gray sky above, but it wasn't there. Instead, a face stared back at me. Mine, older, haunted, eyes hollowed, yet piercing. I froze, Mist drifted low over the water, curling like smoke from edges. The pond rippled faintly beneath my hand, though I hadn't touched it. The reflection remained, watching silent, breathing in sync with me. I took another step. The reflection blinked. Before I did, my heart thudded in my chest, quick and shallow. I could feel the hum of the forest vibrating in my bones, the damp air pressing against my face. I crouched lower, letting the mist wrap around my arms. The pond's surface shimmered as if alive, like a living mirror, holding something just beyond understanding. The reflection shifted slightly, smiling faintly, though no part of me had moved. The pond smelled of cold earth, a faint rot beneath the sweetness of wet leaves. It drew me in, as if each inhalation carried a question I couldn't answer. I reached a hand toward the water. Mist curled around my fingers, coating them in cold dew. The reflection raised its own hand in answer, mirroring mine perfectly, yet somehow not perfectly. A delay subtle and impossible. I drew back. The face frowned, and the eyes followed me, sharp and unblinking, pressing into my chest with the weight of recognition. A soft rustle reached my ears. Leaves stirred somewhere behind me, but the air felt heavy, as if the forest itself was leaning closer, curious, watching me watch the pond. I leaned in again. The reflection blinked slowly, deliberately, faster than I could. It smiled faintly, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. The water was cold in my fingertips when I dared touch the surface. Ripples spread across the pond, but the reflection remained still, staring deeper into me than I dared stare back. The smell of wet stone grew sharper, mixed with a metallic tang from earlier, and a faint hum resonated through the air. It wasn't a pond making the sound, I realized, but the forest itself. The reflection tilted its head slightly, examining me, breathing in rhythm with my own chest. I wanted to step back, yet my feet felt rooted to the damp soil, the mist curling around my ankles, soft and insistent. I whispered my own name. The echo returned differently, slower, distorted, folding into the hush of leaves and mist. The face in the pond twitched at the sound, its lips parting just enough to hint at understanding. I crouched closer still. The surface shimmered, a faint ripple catching the light, distorting the hollow eyes, making them seem alive, almost aware. I leaned forward, breath mingling with the mist, and it blinked again before I could. I could feel the pulse beneath my feet, the soft thrum of the forest in time with my own heartbeat. The reflection whispered something I could not hear, a presence reaching from the pond into the damp mist surrounding me. I drew back slowly, hands leaving faint trails of dew on the water. The face remained, watching, older, knowing, as if it had always been waiting for me to arrive. The forest exhaled around me, leaves rustling softly, branches leaning closer, and the pond held its secret, a mirror of fear, of curiosity, of something I did not yet understand. I stepped back onto the soil. Mist curled around my ankles, and the reflection remained, staring, breathing, waiting as I moved away from the edge of the mirror pond. The forest seemed still, but the branches above me swayed. Slowly, without wind, a faint rustle echoed to the mist, soft, deliberate. Shadows stretched beneath the trees, twisting in ways that felt wrong. I stepped carefully, feet sinking slightly into the damp earth. The smell of wet leaves and moss filled my nose, but beneath it, a faint tang of iron lingered, tingling my skin. I paused. The shadows moved, independently. Faces formed, half-formed, never fully human, never fully imaginary. Eyes blinked. Mouths shifted in silent words I could not hear. Branches arched overhead, leaning toward me. The fog clung to my ankles, cold and damp. The forest breathed, a slow exhale that carried the faintest hum. I took another step. The faces beneath the shadows followed. A rhythm only the forest understood. Soft, swaying movements, synchronized with my own pulse, yet utterly separate, watching, waiting. A twig snapped behind me. I turned. Nothing. Only shadows stretching along the ground, curling like smoke from unseen fires. I moved forward. Branches brushed my hair and shoulders, a soft scratch of bark and moisture. The air smelled damp, earthy, and carried a faint whisper of something metallic, sharp and unsettling. I stopped. The shadows shifted again, faces twisting closer, smiles that weren't smiles, eyes that lingered too long. The branches swayed with them, motionless yet moving, as if the forest was breathing in rhythm with the unseen shapes. I leaned closer to one shadow. The air vibrated lightly, a hum through the fog, through the roots, through my chest. It recoiled when I blinked, then stretched again when I looked away. The rhythm grew heavier, like a pulse beneath the soil, synchronized with my heartbeat, yet not mine. The branches quivered. The mist wrapped around my legs. The shadows rose slightly, elongating, creeping along the ground, always just behind, always just beyond. I breathed slowly. The forest seemed to lean in. Every leaf, every branch, every swaying shadow was aware of me, watching, learning. A faint whisper drifted through the trees, too soft to catch, carried by the mist. It wrapped around my chest, slid along my arms, a presence without form, a rhythm in the silence. I stepped forward again. Branches brushed my face, leaving a damp trace of bark and mist. The shadows mirrored me, moving with a deliberate grace that made my skin crawl. A sudden rustle passed above me. The branches arched as if bowing. The faces beneath twisted again, morphing and stretching, never stationary, never calm. I stopped, heart hammering, letting the rhythm of the swaying shadows settle around me. The forest hummed softly, the mist clinging to my clothes, to my skin, to my thoughts. I moved carefully, following the faint path between the trees. Branches swayed gently. The shadows flowed with them. Soft footsteps echoed in time of my own, yet not mine. I felt the forest breathe, felt the unseen shapes shift in the mist. The rhythm wrapped around me, tight, insistent, pulling me forward while keeping me rooted in unease. I dare not look too long. Each glance revealed more faces, more twisted expressions, more questions without answers. The fog thickened. The branches swayed in silence, and the shadows followed, never resting, never leaving. I whispered my name softly. It returned, fragmented, from the mist, from the branches, from the shadows themselves. A rhythm I could feel in my chest, a pulse not entirely mine. I moved slowly through the forest, letting the swaying branches guide me, letting the shadows mark my passage. The forest breathed with me, watched with me, and I understood, if only dimly, that it would not let me leave unchanged. The branches swayed, the shadows followed, and the forest whispered, soft, insistent, alive. The fog was thick, clinging to my legs, slowing each step. The air smelled damp, earthy, with a faint tang of something metallic. I looked down. Footprints. Mine, clear and pressed into the wet soil. And another, larger, too large to be human. They followed me, step for step. Though I moved alone, their rhythm mirrored mine, exact, deliberate, like a shadow echoing reality. The mist shifted, brushing against my skin, cool, insistent, and I could hear faint rustles, leaves, branches, something heavier moving just beyond sight. I slowed. The other footprints slowed. I stopped. They stopped. My breath echoed in my own ears. The forest seemed to hold its own. A faint static hummed in the fog, like the air itself was vibrating. The ground beneath my feet felt softer, yet firm, pressing against the soles of my shoes, as if the earth were aware. I moved forward again, tentatively listening. Footsteps followed, always matching mine, always just behind. Though no one was there, the trees leaned closer. Their branches scratched my arms and hair, leaving a damp trace of bark and moisture. Shadows pooled between trunks, shifting with the fog, but nothing emerged. Nothing moved except the footprints. I bent down, tracing my own in the mud. The other set mirrored my finger's path. Slow, deliberate. I pulled back, shivering. The forest was quiet, but the silence carried weight. Expectation, a pause before revelation. A soft rustle to my left. I turned. Nothing. The fog swallowed it instantly. Only footprints remained. Two sets leading onward, disappearing into the gray. I breathed slowly, trying to steady myself. The air pressed in, filled with moisture and the faint hum of the unseen. The other set of prints was perfectly aligned, moving with an impossible precision. I could feel them, not just beneath the fog, but inside me. I stopped again. The fog thickened, curling around my ankles, around my waist, and the footprints, they did not hesitate. They continued. I tried to run. The other set ran faster, step for step, matching mine with unnatural grace. The forest blurred, branches scraping my arms and face, shadows twisting in the corner of my vision, but the prints kept pace. I called out softly, my voice swallowed by the mist. Nothing answered, only the echo of my own steps and the heavy imprint beside them. I looked back. Nothing. The fog swallowed everything behind me. No trees, no shadows, no figure. Just the ground, marked by the impossible twin of my path. My chest heaved. The air tasted of damp earth and something sharp like rusted metal. Every step forward pressed deeper into the soft soil, and every step left a mirrored mark. I was not alone, and yet alone was all I felt. The fog swirled, shapes forming just beyond the corner of my eyes. Soft, hesitant, like the forest itself was watching, breathing with the rhythm of my footsteps, and the other footsteps, the echo I could not outrun. I tried to stop thinking, tried to ignore the prints, but my heart, thundering, kept time with the other set. A silent drum, unseen but undeniable. I moved forward slowly, letting the fog guide me, letting the rhythm pull me along. Step for step, the footprints followed. Always, just beyond the touch of my mind. The forest whispered around me, branches swaying without wind, leaves rustling with breaths that weren't mine, and the footprints never faltered. A mirror of motion, a twin in the mist. I kept walking, and the footprints kept following. Step for step, aligned, inevitable, watching without eyes, breathing without form. The fog pressed closer. The forest watched. And I understood I could not escape the rhythm of the footprints in the fog. The forest was quiet, though the fog pressed thick between the trees, weaving around my ankles like liquid. The air smelled of wet moss and old earth, a sharp sweetness hiding beneath. I saw it first as a pale lump beneath the roots. A stone, moss-covered and dark. It hummed softly, a vibration that seemed to pulse through the soles of my feet. I crouched. The stone was cold, damp against my fingers, and when I pressed my palm to it, a current ran through me, soft, insistent, humming in tune with the stone's pulse. Voices, low, layered, indistinct at first, then clearer, memories that were not my own, lives I had never lived, faces I had never seen, yet somehow remembered. The moss smelled earthy, sharp, alive. I could feel it breathing beneath my hand. Tiny vibrations climbing my wrist, pulling me closer. I held still, letting the stone speak. A small rustle came from the fog beyond, leaves brushing together, a shadow moving between trees. But I could not tear my gaze away. The voices pressed around me, gentle yet demanding. They whispered in a language I almost knew, shapes of words forming behind my eyes. A laughter not mine, a sobbing not mine, a warning carried through decades. I pressed harder. The stone pulsed faster and the voices surged. I felt cold soil under my knees, the static hum vibrating in my chest, and the forest holding its breath. I tried to stand, but the stone clung, pulling me back with its unseen gravity. The fog thickened, curling around my arms, around my legs, and I could feel the pulse in every part of me. Images flickered. A child running through another forest, a house burning in a town I had never known, a hand reaching for something lost. Each memory pressed into me, soft and unbearable, as if the stone wanted me to remember it all. The air grew heavier. Each breath tasted of wet stone and ancient wood. My fingertips tingled with every pulse, every whispered secret, and I realized the stone was alive in a way I could not name. I pulled my hand back slowly. The hum softened, the voices fading like fog in sunlight. I could still feel them in my chest, a gentle echo of lives that were not mine. The stone remained silent, still damp, still cold, and yet I knew it remembered everything. I lingered for a moment longer, listening to the silence, hearing the soft rustle of leaves above, the breath of the forest around me. The fog was lighter now, but the stone's pulse lingered in my veins. I finally stepped back, leaving the mossy surface untouched. The shadows between the trees seemed to lean closer, curious, watching the forest reclaim its stillness. The stone hummed faintly once more, and then nothing. I turned away, feeling the echo of other lives trailing in my mind, the forest breathing with them, quiet, ancient, unending. My footsteps were soft on the damp soil. The fog closed behind me, folding around the roots and trunks, leaving only the memory of the whispering stone and the pulse that would not leave me. The fog clung to forest floor, thick and damp, curling around the roots and fallen branches. The air smelled metallic, like iron and wet earth. Even in the dim light, I could see the mist moving, swirling around the base of the trees, as if breathing. Then I saw it, a gate, rusted and twisted, where no path should exist. It leaned slightly to one side, hinges groaning softly, and something in me knew it had always been there, just waiting for me to find it. I touched the metal, cold, rough, flecked with flaking orange rust. It felt heavier than it looked, and when I pushed, the hinges protested with a long, shivering creak. The clearing beyond unfolded slowly, a pale haze swallowing the edges of the trees. The fog was thicker here, denser, and beneath it, shapes lingered, blurry at first, then forming into silent figures that watched. They did not move, they did not breathe, and yet I could feel their attention pressing against my skin, a weight that made my own heartbeat loud in my ears. The ground beneath me was soft, damp, each step sinking slightly into the moss and leaves. The gate rattled behind me with each careful motion forward, as if warning me to turn back. I walked further into the clearing, the fog curling around my ankles, shapes resolving into vague silhouettes. Too far to see clearly, but close enough to feel eyes tracking me. I tried to listen for sound. Nothing. No wind moved the fog. No birds called from above. Only my own breath, shallow and rapid, and the subtle hum of something unseen in the distance. The shapes shifted slightly as I moved, like shadows that were aware of my presence, stretching and bending in the mist. Every step I took forward made the air heavier, thicker with anticipation. I bent down to touch the earth, cold, wet, and almost pulsing under my fingertips. It seemed to thrum in time with the fog, or maybe with my heartbeat. I could not tell which. A faint rustle drew my eyes upward, branches swaying though the air was still. Shadows flickered among them, stretching downward toward the clearing, but no wind disturbed the leaves. I stopped. The shapes remained, unmoving but watching. A silence so complete pressed against my ears that I could hear the fog itself brushing across my skin, the soft static of air heavy with moisture. I took another step. The ground groaned softly beneath me, the fog curling around my legs like smoke. The shapes leaned closer, though they never moved their feet. They waited patient, their presence a quiet, unyielding pressure. I wanted to look away, to retreat to the forest behind me. But something drew me forward, the rusted metal of the gate still visible behind, a reminder that I could leave, and yet I did not. The mist thickened, the shapes sharpening at the edges, blurs forming faint hints of faces, of limbs, but always incomplete, always just beyond clarity. I stood there for what felt like minutes, breathing in the damp, metallic air, feeling the hum of something unseen vibrating through the clearing, the rusted gate behind me groaning faintly in the stillness. Finally, I stepped fully into the center. The fog embraced me, soft, cold, insistent. The shapes seemed to hold their breath, waiting for something I could not name. And then, slowly, I felt the clearing itself exhale, a long, trembling sigh that settled over the forest like a whisper. The gate remained at the edge of the mist, silent now, its rusted metal glowing faintly in the dim light. I could hear the soft drip of water from leaves above, the faint rustle of distant branches, and the figures in fog, still watching, patient, unblinking. I did not move. I could not move. And the clearing held me, and the rusted gate waited, and the fog whispered around my ankles with the soft, insistent breath of something alive. And I was alone, yet not alone, in the watching, waiting forest. The forest lay quiet beneath the pale light, the fog curling like smoke around gnarled roots. Each step I took pressed into damp earth, but when I glanced back, the trail had vanished. Leaves that had been trampled moments before now lay untouched, as if I had never walked there at all. The scent of wet moss was stronger here, metallic, sharp in the humid air. I tried to follow the faint path, but the forest reshaped itself with every step. Trees shifted in the corner of my eyes, their trunks twisting into forms I hadn't noticed before. Branches reached down, brushing my shoulders, and I felt the soft static of the air against my skin. The mist thickened around my ankles, slowly climbing higher as if swallowing the ground. Shadows stretched in strange directions, elongated and trembling, forming angles that didn't belong to the forest. I quickened my pace. A sense of panic rose, a deep, hollow pressure in my chest. The path behind me dissolved entirely, erased by some unseen hand. It was as if the forest had never held it, and I was utterly alone. The air felt heavier now, laden with the scent of damp pine and something older, something metallic and bitter. Each footfall sank slightly into the soft earth, but it no longer felt solid. A liquid gib beneath my soles, distorting the rhythm of my steps. I turned this way and that, hoping to catch the trail again, but each time the forest shifted. A tree I had passed now blocked the way, and where another had stood, only fog remained. It was impossible to know up from down, or forward from behind. A low hum drifted through the mist, soft, vibrating through my chest and teeth. I could feel it in the soles of my feet, like the ground itself was breathing. The shadows seemed to pulse with it, moving independently of the shapes of the trees. The silence pressed against me, a heavy, suffocating weight. Even my own breathing sounded foreign, like it belonged to someone else. I could hear faint whispers in the leaves, repeating my name softly, sometimes mocking, sometimes patient. I stumbled over roots that weren't there before, catching on branches that had appeared in an instant. The forest was a living maze, folding and unfolding around me, and I realized with a cold certainty that I might never leave. The mist curled up around my face, soft and damp against my cheeks, blurring the shapes of trees, erasing the horizon, flattening the world into gray, wet nothingness. I tried call out, but my voice was swallowed immediately. Only the faint hum remained, a slow, vibrating echo that seemed to follow me. The leaves rustled, but the wind did not move. Every exhale I drew felt returned to me by the forest itself. I paused, trembling, trying to mark a direction with memory, but it was impossible to hold on to. Every step erased what I had known. Every glance behind revealed only shifting shadows. The path was gone, the clearing gone, and even the fog seemed alive, curling and twisting to keep me inside its soft grip. My hands brushed the trunks of trees, rough bark, damp with condensation. Yet as I moved, the forest seemed to breathe around me, exhaling warmth and cold, humidity and metallic tang, 1,000 subtle pressures against my skin. I felt my knees, the wet moss pressing against my palms. The rustling leaves whispered closer, a soft, observing hum. I was alone, yet watched. Every instinct screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. And so I stayed, breath shallow, ears straining, feeling the forest folding upon itself, the vanishing trail beneath me, the ever-shifting path ahead, and the endless mist that would not let me leave. The forest did not move. It waited, and I waited too, alone in the folding gray, a single figure swallowed by its quiet, shifting breath. The tree-lean pressed close, dark and dense, each trunk slick with moisture. Fog curled at my ankles, slow, thick, swallowing the forest floor. I stopped, a pause that seemed to stretch for minutes. Pairs of eyes glimmered between the branches, yellow, unblinking. They pierced the mist, pierced me. My breath caught. The air was still, yet every nerve screamed movement. Something unseen pressed against my chest, a silent weight I couldn't lift. The leaves rustled softly, though no wind stirred. A metallic scent lingered faintly, tang of wet soil and something older. The eyes remained fixed, measuring, waiting. I shifted my weight, but they didn't flinch. Even the fog seemed hesitant, parting only slightly where they glowed. It was impossible to know how many waited. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, all silent, all watching. My fingers brushed the damp bark of a tree, rough against skin, grounding me. Yet even that touch felt muted, the hum of the forest swallowing the sensation. Soft shadows twisted at the corners of my vision, stretching toward the watchers, reflecting their gaze back at me. A faint hum thrummed beneath my feet, so subtle I might have imagined it. I held my breath, each inhale sharper than the last. The forest waited with me, breathing slow, measured, patient. I took a step forward. The fog rippled against my legs, resisting, pressing back. The watcher's eyes did not move, but I felt them tracking me, step for step, thought for thought. Branches whispered against one another, soft friction in the silence, like fingers tracing patterns on unseen walls. I could smell wet moss, cold stone beneath the ground, the faint iron tang of something hidden. I stopped again. The air felt thicker now, the weight in my chest heavier. Every sound I made seemed amplified, yet swallowed almost immediately. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, thumping slow and uncertain. I glanced sideways. A pair of eyes blinked, or was it a reflection of mine? They were closer than before, though I had not moved. Every instinct whispered to run, but the forest held me still, soft but unyielding. The watchers remained. Pairs multiply in the haze, an endless grid of attention. They never breathed, never stirred. Yet I could feel their hunger, a subtle pressure curling around my bones. The fog thinned slightly, revealing more trunks, more shadowed forms, each seeming to lean inward toward the watchers. I imagined the forest itself conspiring, its every shape a sentinel, its every whisper reinforcing their silence. I crouched, hands pressed against wet moss, trying to quiet my own breath. The metallic scent sharpened, and a soft vibration shivered through the ground, as if the eyes themselves hummed through the roots. The watcher's glow reflected off pale bark, and for a moment I could see them mirrored in every shadow, 1,000 reflections watching 1,000 reflections, all silent, all patient. I dared a small step backward. Nothing changed. The eyes held, fixed on me, measuring the hesitation, the fear. I exhaled softly, breath warm in the cold air, and the fog swallowed it immediately. No sound returned, no movement, only the silent, patient pressure being observed. The forest held me there, between the dense tree-lean and the watcher's gaze, and I realized, slowly, that they had been waiting for me all along, and that I could not leave, not yet, not while the silent watchers lingered. The trees swayed slightly, though no wind stirred, their shadows stretching toward me, mirroring the glow of countless eyes. The forest exhaled with me, soft and deliberate, and I waited too, frozen beneath the unblinking gaze of watchers who might never blink back. The forest had grown still. No wind stirred the fog that lingered low, clinging to my ankles, wet and cold. Between two trees, I saw it. A door, old wood, swollen with age, iron hinges rusted, impossibly out of place. I stepped closer, fingers brushing against bark still warm from sunlight. It hummed softly, a vibration I felt through my palms. The smell of damp pine mixed with something metallic, like iron and rain. I hesitated. The gap of darkness beyond the door seemed alive, thicker than night itself. It breathed slowly, pulling at the edges of my sight, curling the fog at my feet. I reached out. The wood was rough, splintered in places, but steady. The air shifted as my hand made contact, warm against the chill of the forest. I could hear my own breath amplified in the silence, each inhale a whisper to the unseen. I opened it, a soft creak, like the forest itself exhaling. Darkness spilled into the clearing, an absence that swallowed everything around it. I peered inside. No shapes, no walls, just a void deeper than I could imagine, humming faintly at the edge of my senses. A pulse, slow and deliberate, pressing against my chest. The fog shifted behind me, snaking around my legs. I felt it brush my skin, cold and damp, reminding me that the forest had not released me. Even the trees leaned inward slightly, as if to watch what I would do next. I stepped closer, footfall soft, hesitant. The darkness seemed to stretch toward me, thicker at the edges, licking the air like liquid shadow. A hum rose, subtle, vibrating to the soles of my feet, and I shivered. The door was impossibly real, yet impossibly wrong. No path had led me here. No memory had carried me to this exact spot. The smell of earth, wet moss, and iron deepened, clinging to the back of my throat. I could feel the weight of it pressing down, gentle, patient, and insistent. I placed a hand on the doorframe. Warmth pulsed in my fingers, alive somehow, synchronized with my heartbeat. The air beyond shivered slightly, as if acknowledging me, measuring the pause before curiosity overcame fear. I breathed slowly, in through the nose, out through the mouth, and the world seemed to hold its breath with me. The fog twined around my ankles, dragging the scent of wet pine along, tickling my skin with whispers of what lay beyond. The darkness hummed again, a vibration in the chest, soft, rhythmic, insistent. It called without words, pulling at the corners of thought, dragging me forward without moving a step. I pressed my forehead against the wood, cold, damp, unyielding. I could feel the space beyond stretching, a void that had no floor, no ceiling, no end. It existed only to draw attention, to invite, to remind me that the forest had more than eyes. It had doors, thresholds I had never imagined. I thought of stepping through. One step, and the forest behind me might vanish. The fog would curl, the trees would shift, and I might not exist where I had been. I pulled back slightly. The darkness did not move, did not breathe, did not retreat. It waited, patient, infinite, silent. A rustling behind me reminded me that the forest itself had not let go. Leaves brushed against each other. Soft friction in the hush of evening. The smell of damp earth grew sharper. The hum lingered in the air, a presence just behind thought. I stepped away from the doorway, heart thudding in my chest. The door remained, suspended between trees, older than I could believe, impossibly wooden, pulling at my curiosity even as my fear rooted me in place. The fog curled around my ankles again, soft and sticky, as if reluctant to let me leave the clearing. I turned slowly, taking one last look at the door. Darkness deeper than night hummed softly, inviting, unfathomable, and I felt its gaze linger long after my eyes had left it. The forest whispered around me, but the door did not close. It waited, patient, for the next time I might reach out, for the moment I might step forward, into the void that had no name, no edges, only infinite, silent darkness. The ground was soft beneath my feet, damp soil, rustling leaves, a faint smell of moss and decay. The sun was low, pale light spilling through the trees. I took a step, then another, and heard it, a whisper that was not mine, soft, curling around the trunks, breath that followed my own. It mimicked me. Every footfall returned, but stretched, twisted, sometimes a laugh, sometimes a sigh. The echoes weren't quite right, sliding into tones I could not place. The forest leaned closer. Branches quivered above, casting shadows that moved against the light. I could feel the air vibrating, small pulses against my chest. I wondered if it remembered me, if the trees held memory, if the ground itself could store footsteps. I paused. The echoes did not stop. They multiplied. From one step came two, three, until the clearing swirled with sound, an invisible audience to my motion. Whispers rose, overlapping, soft static beneath each inhale of air. I reached out, fingers brushing a rough tree trunk. It hummed beneath my touch, a low resonance in my bones. The echo of my step trembled in reply, like the forest was testing my presence. I walked again, slowly, cautiously. The echoes grew darker, laughing faintly, like voices recalling a memory they had stored long before I arrived. The leaves rustled in response, shivering over my ankles, sticky with dew and unseen eyes. The forest remembered. Every step I had ever taken here, or perhaps had never taken, was stored, folded into soil, shadow, and bark. I realized then I was not walking freely. I was trapped inside its memory, inside its pattern of echoes. A wind stirred, though the air was still. A soft brush against my ear, almost like breath. The echoes answered it, twisting, overlapping, mocking, inviting, warning. I tried to run. My feet struck the earth, leaves crunching beneath. But the echoes raced ahead, always a beat before me, always a step behind, and sometimes both. I could not escape the sound. It carried me, pulled me, folded me into the rhythm of the forest. The fog thickened around the base of the trees, tangling with roots, curling over stones. It smelled of wet earth and old wood, clinging to my ankles, dragging the echoes with it. They hummed in low frequencies, vibrating through my chest. I stopped again. The laughter and whispers intertwined, a language I almost understood, but couldn't name. The forest held its breath, and I held mine, listening to the shape of my own steps mirrored, multiplied, and reshaped. Each pause stretched seconds into eternity. The clearing seemed to fold inward, trees bending slightly toward me, their shadows long, reaching patient. Even the light seemed hesitant, dimming where it touched the moss. I realized I had become a part of it, not just observed, not merely a traveler, but recorded, preserved in echoes, a repetition that might continue long after I left, or thought I had. I took one more step, and the sound returned before it happened. Slipping through the air, sliding across the damp soil, a soft murmur of regret. The forest exhaled around me, still, heavy and attentive. I did not look back. The echoes followed anyway, a gentle hum beneath my skin, trailing my breath, wrapping around the space between the trees. And I understood I was no longer alone, but part of something that would never let go. I kept moving. Footfall and echo folded into one another, and the forest watched. Silently, patiently, remembering. The forest had quieted. Shadows dissolved into fog. The air was thick, cool, smelling faintly of wet pine and stone. Mist curled around my ankles, soft, persistent. The path stretched before me. Faint, uneven, marked by footsteps I could no longer recognize as mine. It led nowhere I had seen before. Each step sank slightly into the earth, soft, hollow beneath my weight. I noticed the trees had settled too, no longer leaning, no longer whispering, yet a stillness hovered, heavy, patient. Branches swayed faintly, as if breathing in time with the fog. A hum threaded through the silence, low and vibrating, felt in the chest more than heard. I walked slowly. Leaves crunched underfoot, damp and brittle. A breeze stirred, carrying with it faint echoes of past footsteps, my own and others. They shimmered across the ground like distant memories, always fading just before I could follow them. I realized then, this forest was not meant to be left. Not truly. Some paths exist to trap, to fold around perception and memory, so that once you have seen it, you are held inside its form forever. The fog thickened. It pressed softly against my face, wet and cool. I could smell earth, rot, and something older, a faint metallic tang, like memory itself bleeding into the air. Shapes hovered at the edges of vision, tall, indistinct, neither tree nor shadow. I did not turn. I did not need to. The path wound onward, curving gently, impossibly. Where I thought a clearing should be, the ground rose, hollowed, swallowing the sun. The light became pale, uncertain, touching the tops of the trees without ever reaching me fully. I ran my fingers along rough bark. It vibrated faintly beneath my touch, a heartbeat of the forest echoing my own. I breathed slowly, in and out, letting the fog fill my lungs. Every exhale carried a soft whisper. Not words, not language, just a pressing, patient presence. It wanted me to notice, to understand that leaving was never part of this place. A hush fell around me. Even the static hum in the air softened. The path remained, unbroken, endless. I realized the forest had no exit, not in the way I knew. I looked down, saw footprints press into the soil, my own and yet not. Sometimes they preceded me, sometimes followed. The fog mirrored my movements, folding, reshaping, folding again. The air smelled of damp moss, old wood, and a faint sweetness like memory of sunlight I could no longer reach. I felt the earth beneath me, unyielding, patient, and the forest holding me, not violently, but with a calm inevitability. I walked again. Step by step, the fog shifted lightly with each footfall. Shadows shimmered briefly in corners of my vision, elongated, bending toward me, but no eyes looked back. No presence needed to. I understood it already watched, had always known I would come this far. The silence deepened. No rustling, no whispering leaves. Just my breath, fog curling in my mouth, and the soft pulse of the earth beneath. The path before me remained unchanged, endless, unknowable, eternal. I let my shoulders slump, Acceptance pressed gently, like the fog around my legs. I was part of it now. The forest had kept me, but not cruelly, not with malice. Simply with the truth of its nature. The wind stirred once more. It carried the faint scent of pine, decay, and something older. A reminder that even as shadows fade, even as fog swallows, the forest remembers. And I, too, would remember every step I took on the path I cannot leave. I moved forward again, saw footsteps press into wet earth, echoed, disappeared, and I followed the path, always forward, always inside, never leaving. The fog closed gently around me, pale light bending, shadows softening, and I walked, listening to the silent hum beneath the soil, knowing this path would always be mine.